Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 4 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're going to learn Fusion 360 or you're going to die trying. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice. No sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. Those of you who are not helping out yet, look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to teach you is I'm going to show you the overall workflow of how to go from designing something in Fusion 360 to printing it on the 3D printer. The 3D printer we are using is the most excellent Creality Ender 3 version 2. Hopefully you guys have tuned into the first couple of lessons, already have your 3D printer, already have it put together, and have printed your first test print. Now, as I have said many times, any 3D printer will work for this series of lessons. If you use the exact same one that I use, we'll probably have similar problems and we'll be able to interact a little bit more. If in the case you don't have your 3D printer yet, look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon where you can pick up the identical hardware, the identical printer, and the identical filament that I am using. And hey, always appreciate when you guys use my link down below to buy your printer filament. Okay, enough of this introductory banter. Let's jump in and let's get ready to move forward and do our first design. Okay, this is not about how to be a good designer in Fusion 360. This video is not about all the different things you can do in Fusion 360. This is about the workflow. And because it's about the workflow, we will do a very, very simple design in Fusion 360, but I want to show you the whole process. Then as this class goes on, in future lessons, we'll be learning more and more about the design process in Fusion 360, more and more about the slicing process, more and more about tuning and tweaking your printer to get the maximum. But let's just go all the way through things in a very simple case today, and then as classes progress, we will develop more and more skills, if that makes sense. Now, what your homework was for last week was to download and install the Cura slicer, and so hopefully you guys already did that. If you haven't, just go to, search on download Cura, C-U-R-A, download it and fire it up and open it, and then you should be ready to fire up Cura, which I think I can go to over here. I need to switch my camera views a little bit. And when you open up Cura, you get something like this, okay? You can see it looks like a little bit of a picture of our build plate on our 3D printer. So it's sort of just a graphical representation of the build plate on our 3D printer. And then here, what we're going to need to do to set Cura up is we're going to need to select a printer. And the way we do that is, let's see, we come to settings. And guys, I can't make these menus bigger and I can't make them higher contrast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you carefully what I am doing and then give you a chance to follow along. But up at the top, you come to settings, you click on settings, and then you come to printer, and then under printer, you are going to say add a printer. You see that you can add a networked printer or you can add a non-networked printer. We are going to want to do a non-networked printer. So I'm going to expand that by clicking here. And then we don't, if you're working with me, we don't have the Ultimaker, we have the Creality. So we scroll down till we find Creality. There it is. It says Creality 3D. We're going to expand that. and then we'll come down looking for Creality Ender. It looks like there is the Creality Ender 3, the Creality Ender 3 Max, the Creality Ender 3 Pro. I think that probably just the Creality Ender is going to be a good choice, and you could tweak things further. If you know exactly precisely what you have, you can select the other one. Or if you're doing a different printer, just find your printer on the list. This list has most printers. Okay, that is pretty cool. We're going to say add, and now we're just going to go with the defaults. We're not going to really change anything here. We're just going to go with the defaults, and then we're going to say next. And now what we just make sure that we can do is we come over here, and now we select that. You make sure of the available printers, you select that. So now this is ready to slice. So we've got Cura up. So what is the overall design process? You go to Fusion 360, okay? You sketch a two-dimensional object. Then you extrude the two-dimensional sketch into a three-dimensional object. Now, you export that as an STL file because you can't print a Fusion 360 design file. You have to go from Fusion 360, you have to export a .stl file. Now that is going to be saved on your local computer. Once you have that .stl file, you pull that .stl file into the Cura slicer, and you get it situated on the build plate. Then you have the STL file. Now you actually have to slice it, and that slicing process creates what is called gcode. And gcode is actually the specific detailed commands that are sent to the printer, like move to this XYZ position, extrude the filament, move, extrude, and it's got like the speeds, the extrude rate. If you looked at one of these G-code files, you could actually make sense of what it's saying to do, but they are just incredibly long and complicated. You don't have to look at them, so that's the good news, but they're very, very long and complicated because they're giving every single precise motion command to the 3D printer. Okay, now when you do the slicing, you now have a G-code file. That G-code file resides on your main computer. Now you could actually probably hook up your 3D printer to your computer using a USB cable, but I don't want to really fool with that. What I like to do better is I like to save the G-code on an SD card, then move the SD card over to the printer, and then when I go to print, on the printer, it shows me the G-code files that I have put on the SD card. Does that make sense? And right now, I think that's the easiest way to do it. Plus, it just, then I have like one card that has my different G-codes on it. So that's just the way I do it. Maybe later on, we will try to go from Cura directly into the printer through a USB cable, but we're not going to undertake that right now. Okay, hope it makes sense what we're going to try to do today. We've already installed Fusion 360, so what we're going to do now is we're going to actually fire up Fusion 360. And when you fire up Fusion 360, hopefully it will open up to something that looks like this, a completely blank page, a completely blank palette, and it's sitting there just waiting for you to design something. Okay, so a little bit of Fusion 360 and how it works, and this is how you have to think of it. You have to think of whatever you are going to create as a two-dimensional shape that you then extrude into 3 dimensions. You don't go in like a cowboy in 3 dimensions trying to draw something. You look at what you're trying to design and you reduce it down to a set of 2-dimensional shapes which you extrude. And so if you have a cylinder, what is that? That is a circle that is extruded. If you have a box, that is a square that is extruded. If you have the head of a nut, that is a hexagon that you extrude. Then on top of that extruded hexagon, you draw what? A circle, and then you extrude that, and then you've got something that looks like a bolt. So you've got to look at objects in a new way. You've got to look at them not as three-dimensional objects. You've got to look at them as extrusions of simple 2D shapes. And as you can begin to look at things in that way, then you can begin to design in Fusion 360. So the first thing that we're going to do is let's just see if we can make a cylinder, a round circle that we extrude. So where do we start? We start always in Fusion 360. You start with a sketch. Now I'm just going to do a simple sketch today, but just a little heads up. The battle of Fusion 360 is won or lost at the sketch level. And really understanding how to do the sketches and how to do them well and how to do them properly is what will enable you to be successful in Fusion 360. But all those topics are really going to be for a future lesson. So for today, what we are going to do is we're going to do something very simple. And so you want to look here, you see that I have solid. Up here, like you have solid surface mesh, sheet metal, plastic. We are starting at solid. And then what do we want to do? We want to create. Okay. What are we going to create? We are going to create a sketch. We are going to create a sketch. Now, when we say create sketch, we are given this R, red, green, blue axis. And remember, RGB, red, green, blue, is X, Y, Z. And so the red axis is X, the green axis is Y, and the blue axis is Z. We want to design on the XY plane. We want to sketch on the XY plane, and then we will extrude in Z. I should also say that I am using the default preferences on Fusion 360. So what I am showing you is just like Fusion 360 comes out of the box, just like it's installed. I have not changed anything or done anything in the preferences. So when I say create, it shows me this coordinate axis. Where do I want to design? I want to design on the XY plane, and that would be the what? The red-green plane. So that would be, I'll come over here and point. You see, when I point here, that is the plane between the red and the green axis, between the X and the Y axis. So pointing at that, I click, and then it comes up and it gives me that plane to design on. I'm kind of surprised. Usually I would have probably expected that to run up and kind of make this sort of like flat to me. And so I need to do that, and I think that I would do that by clicking. You see this cube up here? I'm going to click on top, and now I'm looking straight down on what looks like a piece of graph paper. That is the XY plane. It gives me kind of a graph there that helps me draw. So what did I want to do? I want to make a cylinder. A cylinder starts as a what? As a circle. Now, when I said create sketch, I want you to see that we are in sketch mode here. How do I know that? Well, these things change to two-dimensional objects from three-dimensional objects that they were a while ago. And I have this sketch palette here. You have to always be mindful. Are you in sketch mode or are you in 3D mode? We said create sketch, so we are in sketch mode. And so we are given an option of two-dimensional figures that we can draw. And one of them is a circle. Now, besides these simple things, you can look here under create and see you can make a line, rectangle, circle, arc, polygon. You see there's all these different things you can sketch with, but we are starting very simply with a circle. Okay, so now I selected circle, and now I'm going to come over here to the center, and I am going to click on the center. So you see I'm going to click on the origin, click. That means mouse down, mouse up. So I'm going to click. I have clicked on it. Now I'm going to drag. And as I drag, I create a circle. Now, this is the thing that you would be tempted to do, is like click enter or click the mouse button again and say, okay, I've eyeballed my circle in. No, not in Fusion 360, not on my watch. Everything, you have to be deliberate about two things. You have to be deliberate about position, and you have to be deliberate about dimension. How are we deliberate about position? We started the circle at the origin. Okay, that is the position. The center of the circle is at the origin. That was deliberate. Now, how are we deliberate about dimension? The way we are deliberate about dimension is, instead of just clicking or eyeballing it, do you see that is giving me, on this diameter that is drawn, it is giving me a radius. I do believe, it looks like maybe that is a diameter, the way they've drawn it, that is a diameter. Yes, and it says specify diameter of the circle. Well, I think I am going to make the circle 35 millimeters. Okay, 35 millimeters. Now I have been precise about what? About dimension. I click enter. And now I have this circle. The diameter is 35 millimeters and it is centered at the origin. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Because we have been deliberate about the position and about the dimension, you notice that this turns, I want you to see that it turns black. And then if we look over here under sketches, you can see that my sketch 1, where we're working, has a little lock. And that little lock means that I have fully constrained it. I've been deliberate about where it is and what the size is. Okay, and that's very important. You really don't want to move on until everything is black and you get that lock, that you have fully constrained your model. And then I could say finish sketch. Okay, and there is my sketch, but now I am back in what? 3D mode. And the way that I can see that better is if I come up here and I click on the little house, it sort of gives me a 3D mode from, kind of a 45-degree angle, okay? But now I think that I am going to go back and I want to edit that sketch, and so I'm going to come in, I'm going to right mouse click on that sketch. I'm going to go back to sketch mode by saying edit sketch. Now you see I'm back in sketch mode. I've got my sketch palette, and I think that I am going to click on that and I'm going to click delete, and I am just going to delete it. Now let me show you the wrong way to do it. We just get this and then we come up here, we click, and then we go like that. And then when I did that, notice now that it is blue and it is not black. And if we look over here at the little sketch label now, it doesn't have that little lock. Why? Because I was very deliberate about what? I was very deliberate about position, but I was not deliberate about what? I was not deliberate about dimension. Well, it's best to put the dimension in when you create it, but I could come back now and I could put dimension by clicking on this sketch dimension tool here, and then coming here and clicking on the circle like that. Okay, click on the radius of the circle, and then I can come here, and now I've got a little dimension box, and I can say 35, enter, boom. What do I have? A solid black circle, and it is fully constrained because I have declared the dimension and the position. Okay, so now we're going to say finish sketch, and we're going to come over here and we're going to click on the little house to get a 3D view. Now, how do you zoom in and how do you zoom out? It is the roller wheel on the mouse. So I can turn that wheel to zoom out. I can turn that wheel to zoom in. And also notice that how it zooms depends on where the mouse is. Here you see I'm to the left and it goes like that. If I come over here, it goes like that. What if I want it to just, like, it's not in the center. How could I get it in the center? I could kind of zoom it over here and get it more in the center. You see how it's like you can move it by zooming? And then what if I just want it to just zoom without moving? I could put it kind of in the center and then I can zoom it without moving. So you see, that's just a little bit about how to get around mouse wheel zooms, and where the thing goes as you zoom depends on where your mouse is. Okay, now This is a what? It's a two-dimensional object. It is a sketch. I want to create a three-dimensional object, so I come up here and I say extrude, okay? Now I could come here and I could pull it up and then I could click enter and I have what? I have a cylinder. What was I not good about? I was not good about being deliberate about dimension. I was not deliberate about dimension, so I'm going to go back, and this time I'm going to do it right. I'm going to come here, and now as I pull up, you could also pull down, okay? But instead of just doing it visually, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to put a number in, 15 millimeters. And then enter. Now this has a radius of 35 and it has a height of 15. Very deliberate. And so now this would be something that is ready to print, but I can't help it. I'm going to give you just a little more, like we're just going to do a little more in Fusion 360 and then we'll move over and print. Okay, so I'm going to go back. All right, I'm going to go back here. And now I'm going to go back to the sketch view. How do I do that? I can point at my sketch, and I could have lots of sketches, and so it's good if you name them, but this is the only sketch, so I point at it, I right mouse click, and I say edit sketch. Now I am ready to edit the sketch. What I'm going to do is I am going to create another circle, and then I'm going to be deliberate about position. I'm starting at the origin. I click, okay, I drag, and now what am I going to do? This was 35 outside diameter, and so I want an inside diameter. What if I make it 25? Hey, that looks pretty good. Now I have a circle inside of a circle. I am going, and look, it's fully constrained because I have the little lock here. Very good. Now I'm going to say finish sketch. Now what could I do? I could select the inside circle, and I could extrude. I could select the outside circle and I could, let's see, that's oh, I had them both. Okay, so let me go back and just start over here. Okay, so I could select the inside circle. I could extrude. I could click off of that and I could select the outside circle. And that is, sometimes you just need to back up completely. Okay, finish sketch. Now what I can do is select the outside circle, extrude, and let's say that I extrude it by 10. Okay, or I could select the inside, and it helps if you can see the sketch. So you see the sketch is not visible. I come over here and click on the sketch, and now you can see it. I can select the inside and I can extrude, and then I could extrude it on up like this, or I could extrude it a small amount, okay? And let's say that we could do like 3 millimeters, like that. Now what have I created? I've created sort of a cup-like object. Now what if I want to move around and look inside of it? You come down and you click on the orbit tool. Do you see down at the bottom here, and it looks like sort of a circle and a circle? I click on that. Now if I left mouse click, I can move this around. Now you need to kind of get good at this, and it also again depends on where you start your click. You see here it behaves a little differently than here. Okay, so you got to get kind of good at this. And you can also do that by coming up to this box up here, and you can sort of rotate your box around. Or you can go top view, you can go back view, you can go right view, you can go front, left, or always a good view is if you click here and just go home, and you can see it like that. Okay, now was I deliberate about this extrusion? I probably wasn't, and so let's do this again and be more deliberate. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to extrude this, and I'm going to extrude this 15. Okay, that looks good. Enter. And then I'm going to make sure that I can see my sketch. So I'm going to turn my sketch. This is not going into sketch mode. This is just showing the sketch. So showing the sketch right here, I can select that enter circle. And then what I can do is extrude, and let's just make it 3 millimeters like that. And now I have made a little cup. Let's look at it. Okay, that looks pretty interesting. And so we've got it dimensioned, we've got it positioned. And so I think this would be a pretty cool thing to be our first print. So what do I need to do? I need to come over here, and you see this little page icon. I need to first of all see if I can save this. And so I'm going to do a save. And then I'm just going to save this as first print. And this will save as a Fusion 360 design file, but I'm going to save it. It should be saved, and so now I am going to export it. Always save it before you export it, because things like the STL file you can't necessarily go in and edit. So you always want to save your original design file. Now I'm going to do what? I'm going to come down, I'm going to export it. And now this is first print V1. It puts a version 1 there. I kind of like how it does that. And then here you give the folder, and you need to create a design folder. Like you can see, I am working in my Fusion 360 folder, and then that's a good place to say it. And now I'm going to say export. Okay, now I will give you a little heads up. It takes a little bit longer than you would think sometimes to export. And let's see, sometimes there's another little thing that came up, but let me make sure that I got that. I'm going to do it one more time just because I'm OCD, but let's see, export. That looks good, and it's version 1. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Export. First print version 1. I set this up, but this we are exporting as an STL file. I thought I'd done something strange. So you see STL file. So I export it as an STL file. It's first print version 1. I come over here and I say export. Now what it usually does is it takes a little bit longer than you would think to do this, but it gives you this little dialog box status. And so you've got to kind of realize that it's going to take a second for this thing to export. And while we are waiting, and I think it's doing this up in the cloud or something, and so maybe it goes faster if you have a faster internet connection. Looks like it has started. But what you need to do is you need to go ahead and get your SD card ready. And remember that SD card, we had left it in the Creality printer last time. We had left it in there, so you need to go ahead and take it out. I always turn the printer off, and then when it stops, then I take it out. And now I'm going to get this ready to put in my computer so I can put that G-code on there in a minute. So I'm getting this all ready to go here in my handy dandy little adapter. What's the good news is? The good news is that our export is complete, so we're going to close it. I'm going to now minimize. I'm now going to minimize Fusion 360, and now I'm going to open up Cura. Now what I should say is Fusion 360 actually has a slicer, and so you could set this up where we could go from here and we could actually generate the STL file, we could slice it to create the G-code, and then we could send the G-code to the printer. And so you could get this thing set up to where it would be almost like printing a piece of paper, where you would just say print this thing and you could go print it. So why am I not using the Fusion 360 slicer? Because slicing is incredibly important, and not everyone is using Fusion 360 for slicing. And so if you have a problem, you might be on your own. To where this Cura software that we are slicing in, it is an incredibly large user base, and there's an incredible knowledge base about how to tweak those slicing parameters in Cura to get the exact result you want. And so I would rather have the extra step and then be able to access that incredible knowledge base that exists around the Cura slicer. So what I do is I export from Fusion 360. Then I come over to Cura, and now I have to find that file. And so I will open up a file explorer here, and I will navigate to that. I'll bring it over into your view here in just a second. Okay, so here is my Top Tech Boy folder, and then there is Fusion 360. And then what do we have here? We have this first print F3D, which was my misstep. Okay, and then I have my first print version 1 STL. I just click, hold the click down, drag, and just anywhere here you drop it. Okay, and boom, there it is. Now, how do we find our way around on our view in the Cura slicer? We'll turn the mouse wheel and you zoom. Turn the mouse wheel and you zoom in and out. If you use the right mouse button, you rotate. Right mouse button is rotate. Center mouse wheel scroll is zoom. And left mouse button is to, let's see. How do I move this? Okay, press, click the mouse wheel. Click the mouse wheel. And if you click the mouse wheel, you can pan. Click the mouse wheel to pan. Right mouse click to rotate, and then turn the mouse wheel. And now if you want to move the print, if you want to move this on the, if you want to move it on the bed plate, you click on it, and then you can move it just with a right mouse click. Okay, but I'm going to be printing here in the center. So we have the what loaded. We have the STL file loaded. Now we need to generate the what? We need to generate the G code. Now, I need to make sure that I have my Creality Ender selected. So I've selected the printer. Now we need to come over here and do the print quality. You can see that it is on standard print quality, but I really want to kind of see initially how much precision and how much quality that I can get out of this printer. And so instead of standard quality, I'm going to go to super quality, 0.12 millimeters. And what is the downside of doing that? Your prints are slower. The higher the quality, the slower the print. Now, there are a lot of different settings here to tweak how the slicing is done. But we're really not going to go into those because these default ones will be fine to start. As we move on, we're going to learn more and more about how to tweak these things, but this is pretty good. And so now with that, I come over here and I say slice. Okay, and then it does the slice, and then the slice is done, and we can come up and we can preview the slice. And then this is something that I think is cool. I'm going to minimize this setting the parameters, and what you can do is you can come down here and you can actually see what your print is going to look like. You can see what your print is going to look like. And then I am going to, let's see, what was that, like this? You can actually kind of look down on it, and it shows you, it sort of shows you what the different layers are. Now, for some reason, it's not showing, it's not giving me a preview of the infill. Usually it'll show you the preview of the infill, but for some reason, I'm not getting the preview of the infill. I think this red is indicating there's something it doesn't like perfectly about this, and so that that STL file that Fusion 360 generated is not viewed as being perfect by the Cura software, but it's gonna work fine. And as we go through it in future lessons, we can dig into this and get a little bit more precision in this thing. But for right now, we are just trying to what? We are just trying to get our first print. Okay, so now we We had the STL file, we sliced it, it generated the G-code. Now we've got to get the G-code on the STL card. So I need to awkwardly lean over here and see if I can blindly find the USB port on my computer. Okay, I heard the happy little noise there. And then look, do you see, I guess you can't see that. So let me make this where you can see it. Okay. Now, do you see this had said save to disk, but once I plug the USB in, it says save to removable drive. So I can save to disk or save to removable drive. I want to save to the removable drive. So I click that, and then it has saved. And I really like this. This is super cool. It gives you the ability to eject that SD card right here from the software. So I say eject, and it says safely remove the hardware. So I'm going to go get it. And then here it is. I'm going to put it back in the printer. And so I think you all would probably enjoy this view here right now. And then I will put this in. And remember, it goes with the pins, the copper connectors up as you put it in. And let's see, I only have one available USB in the front, and so therefore I need to come in, and I think I will try to plug in my my webcam again. Okay, like that, so I can give you a little bit of a webcam view. And then remember, we had this dual view where you can kind of see what's going on. All right, now what I need to do is I need to turn the printer on like that. And what's the most important thing now? I just print, right? I come over here and print, right? No, what do I need to do? Every print I need to level the bed. And so I'll give you a view from over here. And so what I'm going to do is, I guess I should show you my little menu here. Okay, so I'm going to come up to prepare, and I'm going to say auto home. Okay, it's got it all set now. I come up and disable stepper, and now I'll move it over here. And you should still be able to see what I am doing. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually move this over here, and I'm going to start leveling. So like right now, at this corner, I'm feeling just a little bit of resistance. I like that. Over here, I have a little bit too much resistance. Guys, this is hard because you're using right hand and left hand, and so it's very hard to think tightening and loosening because you tend to do it wrong with your left hand. And so what I like to think is, I like to think that clockwise, because you can always think clockwise. Clockwise on these wheels makes the paper tighter. Clockwise is tighter. Counterclockwise is looser. So as I'm going counterclockwise, it's pulling the bed down. So I'm going counterclockwise, the bed is being pulled down. Okay, that's pretty good. And then I come up here, counterclockwise is loosen, clockwise is up and tighten. That feels pretty good. Okay, this is too tight, so counterclockwise is loosen. Okay, counterclockwise is loosen. Okay, and now I come over here, and that feels pretty good. Now I'm going to kind of try it in the middle. That is feeling a little bit tight there. And so I'm going to just loosen these a little bit. Loosen them a little bit. Loosen them a little bit. And so we're going to take our time. Loosen a little bit. Loosen a little bit. Loosen a little bit. And loosen a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to come back to the center, and it kind of feels pretty good in the center now. So guys, let me know how much luck you are having leveling your build plate. I just had no problems at all just doing the standard installation, the standard build. I'm able to flatten this thing and things are working pretty well. If any of you guys are having trouble getting it leveled where you can't get it level all over, that like you run out of play on those little screws, or if it's leveled very well on the outside but then in the middle is low or the middle is high. If you're having leveling problems, then maybe we can do a couple of special videos on that. But what you got to understand, a 3D printer is not like a normal inkjet printer that you just plug and play. These things, you're constantly having to tweak them, constantly adjust them. And it's sort of like a project in and of itself, is keeping the 3D printer all nice and tuned up and ready to go. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's see. I think I've got this thing. Nicely flattened, and so I'm going to come back over here, and we are going to go to the top and back. We are going to come over to print, and then what do I see? I see my CE3 first print. I click the button, and then I will change the camera view here to see if we can get you a little better view of our build area. Did that look better over here? I don't know. Maybe I like that one a little bit more right there. Okay, I'm watching my temperature. It'll take a couple of minutes for this to come up to temperature. Okay, guys, leave me feedback. You've already printed that test print. Did that go okay? And what I need to see is that if a whole bunch of you guys ordered this printer and a whole bunch of you guys are kind of having a similar problem, then maybe we need to dig into it and do a video on that. Like I say, I got mine installed. I've been doing quite a few prints. I'll show you sort of what I've been playing with here. You can see that I've been playing with making nuts and bolts, and that is really a lot of fun. Please don't try to do this until you watch my videos, okay, because this is more tricky than you would think. But you can see that I've got a nut and I've got a bolt, and they actually just fit together perfectly. Just a very nice, very nice connection there. And so part of the projects we're going to be doing is seeing how to design nuts and bolts, but really let's wait till we get to those lessons. Don't try to do that on your own, because there are some pretty tricky things, and I can save you a lot of time. I am coming right along here. My bed temperature is up to 50. That's good. My nozzle temperature is on its way to 200. That's interesting. The slicer has it at 50, and I'd actually thought that this used 60, and so let me come back over here to Cura. Let's see, there you can see it. So let's look here under settings. Print speed is 50. Okay, build plate temperature is 50. I thought that was 60. But 50, 60, that's something that we can tweak if needed. Just looking here at the other default settings. I guess I can kind of tell you one thing here is on adhesion, what these terms mean while we're waiting for my printer to heat up. You see that you have like 4 different choices: skirt, brim, raft, and none. Now, what none is, it just goes in and starts printing. It just goes in and starts printing your item. What a skirt is, which we were selected, what the skirt does, I guess I changed that, so I have to reslice it. Okay, what a skirt does is it puts this ring, so it starts by making this ring, And I really like that because if there's something globby on the end of the extruder, or it takes a little bit just to get your extrusion going, you start there in that general region. And now let's see, let me come back over here. You can see that it's going to start and it's going to make that skirt. That gets the nozzle clean, gets things flowing well, and then it moves in and starts doing your actual design. The difference between a skirt and a brim would be the skirt goes all the way to the design and connects, which gives you more of a practice area. Okay, now let's see here. That is looking like a very fine circle. Okay, so that is the skirt. Now a brim would be all the way from the outside of the skirt to your design, so you have a larger practice area. But since it connects to your design, when you break that skirt off, you got a little bit of a rough edge. When you break the brim off, you've got a rough edge. So I like doing skirt and not brim. Then what is Raft? Raft builds like a lattice, and then you build above that lattice. So if you're having like really bad problems with adhesion, or you're having really bad other problems, you build a raft and then you build on top of that raft. Really, I think people use rafts when they shouldn't. If you have your printer tuned in right, you should not have to build a raft. You should be able to build what you are trying to build directly on the build plate. So when I see people using rafts, I think that's someone who is not keeping their printer tweaked up right. Okay, let's look at that. Man, I think we are getting a beautiful first layer here. And again, when I look at it, it just really looks like that smooth kind of peanut butter first layer. Okay, it's really just a very nice looking first layer. And if you see on my skirt, there is a little goober that's kind of hanging off, like a little piece of filament. Maybe that was a little filament that was stuck to the nozzle. And so that's the great thing about doing a skirt. That little imperfection that you got from the start of your print, it's over, in an area that doesn't matter. And now, as I look at it, I am seeing just an absolute beautiful first layer. I'm going to let it go a little bit longer there. Yeah, that's just absolutely a beautiful first layer. Okay, guys, I don't think that you actually want to sit and watch this for the next hour and a half. And so what I'll do is I'll pause the video and then I'll come back as we are getting this thing done. So we'll take a quick view of the river here. I'm making this a little bit later in the morning, and the fishermen have already dropped their nets, so we're not seeing any fishermen right now. But basically, I'm going to sit, I'm going to enjoy my coffee, do a little reading, do a little studying, and then I will rejoin you. And as this is gone very well. And I am now at 98%. And so the print is just about finished, and it has gone most beautifully. One of the things that you kind of notice is over here when it was making the skirt, it's got a little bit of an imperfection. Well, that's kind of the purpose of the skirt. Any little globs, any imperfections you get out of the way at the skirt, and then when you start printing your main design, your main item, your nozzle is working and flowing smoothly. And so I really, really like putting those skirts on there, because oftentimes when you first start extruding and printing, there is a little bit of an imperfection. And so the skirts work really well for me. I was telling you that the brim would be the skirt, all the way to the print would be a brim. And I usually don't like to do the whole brim, because then you end up having to deal with it, knocking it off. And in most cases for me, the skirt by itself will really work. And like I said, if you're using a raft and printing on a raft, then it's usually you haven't really invested the time in your printer to get it tweaked up and aligned perfectly, and that's probably why you're having to do a raft. It is now finishing up that top layer, that final layer, and we should any minute now see this thing pop out. And then we'll talk a little bit about looking at the print before we take it off. There's a little bit of an inspection that I like to do. And one of the things is, okay, so we have a successful print. But one of the things I like to do is really look around the base and see, is it perfectly adhering perfectly flatly to the bed all the way around. And when I look over on one side, there is a tiny little gap, like it's starting to peel up. That happens, and that is not unusual, but that is not perfect. That if we are doing things perfectly, then our print, at the end of the print, should be completely adhered to the build plate. That should be our goal. Because as I see this tiny little gap here where on one edge it was starting to peel up, if we don't address that, what the danger is, if the peel gets a little bit worse, it could peel up to the point that it pops off your build plate during the build. And this is kind of the nightmare scenario. You start your print, it looks great, and then you leave, and then it's printing, the peeling gets worse, it pops off. Now when it pops off, you're trying to print or extrude into thin air, and there's nothing to print on, and so you get a big glob of filament underneath your print head, and it can clog your print, it can clog your extruder, it can create a very big mess on your print head, your hot end. It can actually come around and enclose like some of your electrical connections and wires. You can damage your printer when that happens. And so one thing is, it's a little bit dangerous to leave your printer unattended for hours at a time. And the other thing is, you really want to be addressing this adhesion. So how would we address the adhesion? Well, one thing is getting a little more precision in our techniques for leveling the bed. Maybe we would need to go in and align the printer more perfectly so that we can get flatter beds initially. Other things would be like our initial speed that we are extruding the first layer. Another thing would be the temperature of the print bed. So those are all things that we can be fine-tuning and tweaking as we go along. But now I want to get this off of here. One of the things I said earlier is I don't like to come in and start kind of chiseling underneath it, because there's the damage that there's the chance that the corner of this thing is going to damage the print. And so for this one, I think the safest way to get it off would just be to put my hand here and just kind of tap it. And so I'm going to just sort of tap it, and it pops right off. And look at that. We have a most beautiful little cup here. And now I like to kind of look at this, and really there was only a very, very small amount of peeling. Yes, I want to address it, but this was really quite good. And then when I look at the edges of the print, I'm looking for imperfections, and wow, it is really just a super, super smooth edges. You're not seeing like it's very, very hard to see the individual print layers. And then the top is also very nicely finished. And so this I would consider to be a glowing success, Okay, guys, let me say a couple more things about slicing, because while I was sitting here enjoying my coffee, I told you I wasn't sure why the infill wasn't showing as we were doing the preview. Let me go back to Cura here and show you what was going on. So we can come in, and then if you remember, we can come up and say preview, and then if we come over here, we can see the different layers. As we pull this down, we can see the different print layers. And then what I was confused about earlier was when I look in here, that between the inside wall and the outside wall, it was empty and it was not showing the infill. Well, you need to come up here under color scheme, line type, and say show infill. And then when you show the infill, it shows you how it is filling it in. So this is the kind of like structural material between your outer shells and your inner shells that give your design strength. Okay, it gives your design strength, and you can see that infill. Now, actually, I think it's quite fun to play around with the different infills, and so let's just take a look here. I'm going to come back over, and I'm going to look at my parameters, and you can see infill density. 20% is actually pretty dense. You could go down and you could do, let's see what it looks like if we say 3%. Okay, if we change that, we are going to have to come in and reslice. And that's the little thing behind me. And you see if we do a 3% infill, it's much, much less structure in there. Good news is you save filament. Good news is it prints faster. Bad news is it's not quite as strong. So let's maybe go in and say 7%. I kind of think 7% might be sort of a reasonable thing for a lot of things. And you can see that that is showing that. I'm going to go back to the 15% so we can see more fully see the structure that it is creating. And then I slice it again. The slice button is behind me, so you're not seeing it. Okay, this is what I think doesn't matter very much, but to me it's just incredibly interesting, and that is to come in and look at all the different things, the different ways you can do the infill. Like we can do a grid, and I'm going to look at a grid here. And back in the old days, really everything was a grid, and that is just kind of like a lattice of squares. And so that would be the grid. Let me see. Let me change this to 25 so you can see it a little better. Okay, you can see that a little bit better. You could do lines, which are just parallel lines. You could imagine triangles. The cubic is an interesting one. And then you can do like an octet, which is interesting. And really, I don't think these things matter, but I just find it interesting looking at the different geometries that can be created as you are printing. No one really sees it after that. The quarter cubic is also an interesting one. Okay, and so now let's come back over here and you can look at what it looks like at different levels, all the way down to your first level. And then you can see that base is getting infilled. And then we put the lid on the base and then we build on up. And also interesting, I think I'll have to turn my title off for you to see it. Also interesting here is if you look here, you can actually play a level, which shows you step by step where your print head is going to go. So let's go down to our very first level, and then we can bring this back to the left, and we can actually see if we press play, it starts by making the skirt, and you're actually looking at the travel that the print head is going to take and what it's going to print when. And I think I can maybe speed this up if I pull it like that. So now you see it did the skirt, and now it starts with the outside of the main print, does that outside ring, and then it infills that lower level, lower layer, and now it's ready to go to layer number 2. And so I think that that is just pretty darn neat. You guys leave me comments down below. Are you guys getting this to work? Were you able to do your test print? Were you able to do this complete workflow? Is it working? And if you guys are having trouble, like if a certain group of you are having very specific problems, then I can go in on the Ender and I can try to see if I can show some ways to tune up your Creality Ender. Now, unfortunately, with 250,000 subscribers, I can't individually debug every problem that each one of you is going to have. So if you put a comment down below, well, my first layer isn't adhering, I just can't try to help every single one of you with every single specific problem. Leave a comment. Maybe some of you guys that have been playing with the Ender longer can kind of monitor the comments and see if you can help some people out. But I'm going to be looking and seeing if there's any common problems that lots of people are having. And if there is, then I'll make a video on it. If you're having a more subtle problem or a non-mainstream problem, then what you can do is there is a huge user base, a huge user community for the Creality Ender printer. You can Google your specific problem, and likely you will be able to find some tips on how to address that. I feel good that I'm getting very good results with my printer, with the things that I'm doing, without having to go in and do a lot of tweaking. So next week's lesson, what your homework for this week is to do a few simple prints. Okay, do a few simple prints. Don't be a hero. Don't try to be John Wayne. Just go in and do some simple sketches, like maybe print a cube, maybe print a few more tubes. Just print some simple things like that where you go through the whole workflow. Now remember, the battle of Fusion 360 is won or lost at the sketch level. And so next week it's going to be a Fusion 360 lesson, and what I'm going to be showing you is how to kind of begin to master the sketch level. And if you can master the sketch level, then everything else in Fusion 360 is going to work better. And specifically, we are going to be looking at constraints. And if the reason everybody gives up on Fusion 360 is they don't understand constraints. If you understand constraints, then everything will begin to make sense. You will be able to master the sketching, and then if you can master the sketching, the extrusion and the 3D part actually is quite interesting and quite fun. Guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking these lessons as I am making them. If you enjoyed this lesson, give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Thumbs up and comments helps us with the old YouTube juice, and YouTube will be offering this to more people. And that is important because the world needs more people who are doing engineering and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TalkTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.